It was meant to be a triumph, a dazzling moment of renewal for the House of Windsor, a fresh chapter rising boldly from the smouldering wreckage left by Edward VIII's abdication. But instead of pageantry and promise, May the 12th, 1937 unfurled as a day laced with anxiety, resentment, and more than a pinch of bungling behind the scenes. The coronation of King George VI, grandfather to King Charles III, would never be smooth sailing. Britain was still reeling from the scandal that had rocked the monarchy to its core, and now the crown rested on the head of a man who had never expected to wear it. Beneath the ceremonial grandeur, one question echoed through palace halls and public pubs alike. Was the new king truly ready for the weight of the crown? And so began a reign that no one saw coming, born out of ambition, but out of duty, doubt, and the desperate need to restore faith in a shaken throne. Before we get started, if you want to support the channel and find all my links in one place, just scan the QR code on screen. It'll take you to my Patreon, social media, and even books. Everything's there. Now don't worry if you missed the code now, I'll show it again at the end of the video. So thanks for your support. Now, let's get into this week's story. George, known to those closest to him as Bertie, was never supposed to wear the crown. As the shy, stammering second son of King George V, he lived comfortably in the shadow of his elder brother David, the dashing and headstrong heir who became King Edward VIII. But David's reign was almost over as soon as it began. 325 days of glamour, scandal and stubborn defiance ended with his dramatic abdication and exile, leaving behind a stunned nation and a throne in crisis. In hindsight, the warning signs had been flashing for months, yet no one had seriously considered what would happen if David walked away. Certainly not Bertie, who had never been groomed for kingship and who collapsed in tears on his mother's shoulder when faced with the unthinkable. The thought of stepping into his brother's shoes wasn't just daunting, it was unimaginable. He knew nothing of being king. And if Bertie was filled with dread, he was not alone. Inside the palace walls and across Whitehall, a wave of unease rippled through the establishment. Courtiers whispered, politicians fretted, and church leaders clutched their collars. Bertie was decent and dutiful, but also painfully shy, physically frail, and plagued by a lifelong stammer. Could this uncertain man restore the monarchy after such a public humiliation? Few were convinced. The doubts began to surface publicly within weeks. In January 1937, less than 2 months after his reluctant assent, Buckingham Palace announced that the new king would not attend the Grand Durbar in India, a lavish celebration of imperial might planned to mark his accession. Behind the scenes, the truth was simple and sobering. The thought of such a spectacle was too much for him. He was overwhelmed, anxious, and struggling beneath a crown he had never sought. The cracks weren't just visible, they were widening, and Britain, already reeling from one royal crisis, was now watching nervously to see whether its new king could steady the throne or crumble beneath it. He was overwhelmed with the magnitude of the task thrust upon him, wrote Lord Wigram, King George VI's private secretary, with a diplomat's understatement. Bertie himself had been more blunt. He begged for time and pleaded for space to settle down before being fully thrust into the unrelenting glare of monarchy. Behind the polished walls of Buckingham Palace, concern was mounting. The king's doctors warned of his fragile nerves, urging caution with anything that might add strain. One newspaper ominously referred to falling fits as a veiled suggestion of epilepsy, a condition still cloaked in misunderstanding and stigma in the 1930s. Whispers became murmurs, and murmurs became headlines. At the very top of the tree, the mood was unsettled. The News Chronicle reported a crop of rumours sweeping Westminster and the royal court, suggesting grave doubts about the king's mental and physical fitness. And it wasn't just the press sniffing out trouble. One report spoke of whispering campaign from Britain's most gilded drawing rooms, Mayfair hostesses, flashy stockbrokers, and even a few MPs, all gossiping in tones just shy of treason. Not that anyone was being dragged to the Tower. Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, ever the pragmatist, was interested in cracking down on drawing room chatter. What did alarm him was the possibility that Bertie might truly break down. He quietly advised the king to remain at Sandringham, away from the pressure of London, for as long as possible in the lead-up to the coronation. It was more than caution, it was fear. The royal family in Britain could not withstand a second failure, wrote historian Kenneth Rose. Edward's abdication had torn a gaping hole in the monarchy's fabric. If George crumbled too, there would be no recovery. There was no understudy, no plan B. The monarchy as an institution would be dangerously close to collapse. As the coronation neared, those in the know grew visibly tense. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Cosmo Lang, rejected the BBC's request to televise the ceremony, arguing it wasn't worthwhile. But the real reason was far more telling. If anything went wrong, if the king stumbled, stammered or froze, the cameras would catch it all. There'd be no do-overs, no gentle edits, no regal filter. The crown was slipping on the edge of uncertainty, and the eyes of the nation were waiting to see whether Bertie could rise or falter on the day that mattered most. There was also a growing sense among palace insiders and the public alike that something was bound to go wrong. Interfering and officious as ever, wrote biographer Sarah Bradford. As the ever-meddling Archbishop of Canterbury, Cosmo Lang, made yet another suggestion. The king, he felt, should try a new speech therapist. It was a risky idea at best, and absurd at worst. Bertie had already placed his trust and much of his progress in Lionel Logue, the unorthodox Australian who had worked tirelessly to help him manage his stammer. Their bond was built on patience, trust, and quiet resilience. Logue wasn't just a therapist, he was a lifeline. Swapping him out in the final weeks before the coronation would have been likely changing horses midstream with rapids ahead. Thankfully, someone had the good sense to realise that. Still, for all the ancient rituals and public spectacle of Coronation Day, what loomed largest in Bertie's mind wasn't the orb, sceptre, or crown. It was the microphone. The very idea of addressing the nation live, his voice carried across every wireless in the land, filled him with dread. He wasn't battling just to stammer, but wrestling his deepest insecurities in front of an entire empire. But this time he wasn't alone. Logue stood at his side, and so did Robert Wood of the BBC and the imposing Lord Reith, the corporation's chairman. Together they anchored him, and when Bertie finally delivered his speech, slow, careful and steady, the nation heard not a faltering man, but a king finding his voice. For him, that was the actual battle, and it was won. As for the coronation itself, steeped in 1,000 years of royal tradition, it unfolded with far less gravity than anyone expected. At the dress rehearsal, the king watched with barely contained amusement as the grand, puffed-up Archbishop of Canterbury managed to collide with the rotund Dean of Westminster. Robes tangled, feet slipped, and holy dignity gave way to pure slapstick. It was like something out of a West End farce. Bertie, who had once wept at the thought of becoming king, now found himself trying not to laugh. And maybe that was the moment he realised he could carry the weight of the crown after all. Bishop of Norwich, bless him, was already battling age and ceremony, but the real enemy that day turned out to be the Bible. Not just a Bible, but a massive ceremonial tome, so hefty that according to Sarah Bradford, it would have collapsed under the weight. In a quiet scramble backstage, a smaller, lighter version was found just in time to spare his dignity and prevent a bishop-shaped hole in the abbey floor. Coronation Day dawned not with gentle fanfare, but with the jarring squawk of loudspeakers being tested at 3 a.m, directly beneath the king's bedroom's window. Bands began to arrive by 5 a.m. to line the streets with martial splendour, but for Bertie, it was anything but uplifting. Sleep was impossible. He wrote in his diary, "I could eat no breakfast and had a sinking feeling inside." The ceremony itself was a comedy of errors cloaked in velvet and gold. A fainting Presbyterian chaplain brought Queen Elizabeth's procession to an awkward halt at the abbey entrance, leaving the king waiting so long, he half joked, it felt like hours. And then came the coronation oath, a moment meant to inspire reverence and solemnity. Instead, it was a game of guesswork, thanks to the Archbishop of Canterbury's thumb obscuring the words Bertie was meant to read. And as if that wasn't enough, the Duke of Portland and the Marquess of Salisbury got entangled when their garter chains snagged on a silk cushion. Medieval grandeur quickly gave way to medieval slapstick. And then, of course, the crown. To avoid royal embarrassment, someone had thoughtfully stitched a small red thread inside the ancient coronation crown to guide the Archbishop on which way round to place it. Unfortunately, someone else, equally well-meaning, had removed it, so as the crown was set upon his head, Bertie had no idea whether it was front, back, or sideways. The final indignity came moments later as he rose after the crowning. The bishop accidentally planted himself squarely on the hem of the king's robe. I had to tell him to get off it pretty sharply, as I nearly fell, Bertie chuckled later. But through it all, through every misstep, miscue, and moment of quiet terror, Bertie endured. He made it through the day with steady resolve, a dry sense of humour, and the unwavering support of his beloved wife, Elizabeth. And more importantly, he made it through the years that followed. His reign lasted just 15 years, cut short by ill health in 1952. But in that time he did what many thought impossible. He healed a wounded monarchy and restored the public's faith in the crown. And his most lasting legacy, a daughter, Elizabeth II, whose reign would define an era and prove that sometimes the quietest monarchs leave the deepest mark. If you missed the opportunity at the start of this video, then here's your second chance. If you'd like to support the channel and find all my links, just scan the QR code on screen. It'll take you to Patreon, social media, and even my books. Every bit of support helps me keep making videos like this, and even a thumbs up or a comment on the video increases its chances of being seen by more people. Now I really appreciate you being here, so thanks for watching.